Do you think your job could be taken over by AI? I read an article recently about the impact of artificial intelligence on the workforce. I know that AI is something a lot of people feel super anxious and worried about. I'll just start by sharing my perspective that I think it's like any new technology that we don't fully understand and we don't know how we're going to use it. If you want a couple examples, back when the radio was invented, which today is like, well, of course, the radio, Thomas Edison said the radio craze is a scourge that may destroy the English language. In 1899, related to the telephone, there was an editorial in the New York Times that said the telephone will make men lazy and unwilling to leave their homes. It added that, quote, strangers' voices entering the home feels ghostly and invasive. That's the telephone. And then finally, 1909, when the airplane was invented, there was a group of pastors that criticized the Wright brothers and preached that flight was an attempt to, quote, invade the realm of angels. All to say, I think that any new technology needs to be understood, but I do believe for all of the anxiety that I don't think is warranted, there is some legitimate concern about AI taking over jobs. There is this article I read that basically shares a 5-letter acronym, almost like qualities of our humanity that make jobs more resilient and resistant to AI takeover. They called it the EPOCH or EPOCH score, EPOCH. And these are the qualities of empathy, presence, opinion, creativity, and hope. And the idea of this article is a very simple, short article, was that the more of those 5 qualities there is in a job, the more human skills are required, the more resilient that job would be to take over by AI. So that was the article. That was the end of the article. But then my mind began to wander. I started looking around the world and noticing things online. If the acronym represents qualities that are uniquely human, that of course make jobs more resilient and resistant to AI takeover, I thought to myself, in what ways could we, in failing to reflect these qualities, in some ways be becoming less human? Is there value in evaluating ourselves on the basis of these things and asking ourselves? Now, of course, this is a pretty imaginative train of thought, but it's been very helpful for me personally, so I wanted to explain what I meant. The first letter of the acronym, empathy, is what this means. Empathy is the ability to feel and to enter into someone else's experience. The first thing that hit me when I saw that word is that for all the content online, all of the information, all of the conversation, something that's notably lacking, if you pay attention, is empathy. There's arguing, there's bullying, there's gaslighting, there's shaming, whatever that is. Rarely do I see a comment that says something like, I'm so sorry for what you've been through. That must be hard. Or even expressing curiosity. What was that like to go through that? See, empathy isn't just affirming everybody's everything or saying you're right no matter what and how you think or feel. It's stating that before we get into the content of what you're saying, I'm going to realize 2 things. Number 1, every person has a story and every person has a struggle. And we have no idea what another person's struggle is like. So empathy at a baseline is a commitment to enter the story. Empathy enters the story. Jesus, it says, had compassion when he looked out over this city of people. He said he had compassion because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. And I thought about that. When I look out at the culture, when you look out at the culture, when you read the news, when you see crowds of rioters or whatever that is, what is your first emotion or instinct? Is it compassion or is it criticism? Is it anger? Is it annoyance? See, if we don't feel compassion, it's not because our culture is just that bad. It's because we're just that desperate for the transformational power of Jesus in our hearts to feel compassion and empathy for a fellow human being. So that is one quality that makes us uniquely human. We can enter in, we can identify, we can feel. And I think of Jesus, who in Philippians 2, it says, gave up the pleasures and in some ways the perspectives of heaven. He came down, he took on human flesh to feel what we feel. And he was no superhuman. You think he just maybe could skate through life. But when his friend Lazarus died, shortest verse in the Bible, John 11:35 says that Jesus wept. What's fascinating about that to me is it made no sense for him to weep in light of what he knew was coming. See, if Jesus was an AI engine, he would have said, you don't need to cry because Lazarus will be raised from the dead, right? Just the facts, black and white. But Jesus, despite that he knew this was all going to pass and that the resurrection was coming, he entered into this human experience of pain and grief, and he wept with the people. That's empathy. The second thing, the P, is presence. Here I am making a video separated from you, and a lot of people watch church online, right? That's become more and more of a thing, and for some a necessity post-COVID. But as much as we can do this, there is no amount of cameras or the quality or the megapixels that can ever replace the power of presence, right? Of being together. And Jesus, again, came down to us. His name, Emmanuel, means God with us. In the Psalms, it says God is near to the brokenhearted. That is interesting. That's not a statement of fact. That's a statement of proximity. That's like he's close. Hey, can you hear him? Here he is. You can feel, you can touch. Presence is something no AI engine can ever replicate. And so we may think when we're sitting with someone in pain, how do I help this person? What do I say? How do I fix or give some advice? The most powerful thing you can do is be present. Show up. That is so underrated. And so we may think, okay, well, at that point, so what's the goal? It's to be around people, right? But you ever been to a city and you see people packed in like sardines and they're all scurrying around to all of their different things, obviously oblivious to the presence of the people around them? Which is why I originally honestly thought to ask, are we becoming less human? I love that episode in John chapter 4 where Jesus is with the Samaritan woman at the well and he's ministering to to this woman in this countercultural, surprising way. And the disciples keep bugging him and telling him he needs to eat. Jesus, you got to eat some food. And Jesus, I can just picture he's kind of like had it a little bit with this counter kingdom mentality. And he says, guys, you're not noticing the people that are all around you. You're surrounded by people. And he uses this harvest analogy of looking at the fields and going, oh, yeah, we still got about 4 months before we have to pay attention to that. And he goes, the harvest is now. The fields are white for harvest. But I love what he says in verse 35. He says, look, I tell you, lift up your eyes and see the fields are white for harvest. In other words, there's people that you're actually surrounded by, but you're not actually seeing them. I think the most profound aspect of these words from Jesus is the statement, lift up your eyes. I know the disciples, like every time in culture, probably had this tendency to put their heads down and move from one thing to the next, especially if you go to the East Coast. It feels like we're a bunch of zombies. But especially today with phones, it's almost like Jesus' words had a prophetic and poignant purpose for us today. Lift up your eyes, right? Stop looking down at your lap. You're surrounded by people, souls, lives that are looking for hope and meaning. You're there in front of them. But it starts not with sharing the gospel. It starts with lifting up your eyes. Look, notice. See, presence starts with attention. It starts with countering our tendency toward preoccupation with ourselves. And it's making eye contact. It's smiling at someone else. Because the further we move from presence, the less human we become. O is opinion, right? AI can offer responses based on the existing content that's out there, but it cannot generate a truly original thought. There is no spark of inspiration based on not just the data, but experience, sentience, emotion, processing of the nuances of life. That is uniquely human. And now again, we may hear this and think, oh, well, there's lots of opinion. There's no shortage of people sharing that. But here's what I would suggest. Opinion is different than criticism and critique. Critique is picking apart someone else and what they're saying without formulating and contributing anything meaningful to the conversation. That's opinion. As humans, we have a unique ability at our best to be empathetic and present and to disagree. I think we have lost the art of disagreement, to have different opinions in tension and stay in relationship. That's where AI, of course, falls flat. I have dabbled. I put it off for a long time just because it wasn't no interest to me. But I started messing around with ChatGPT and AI Engine and typing in different questions and saying, here's what I've been thinking about this. What do you think? No matter what I suggest or ask to ChatGPT, what do you think about this? It will always say some version of, that's amazing. Great job. That's a fantastic observation. Very insightful. Endlessly affirming, right? ChatGPT isn't going to offer a thoughtful opinion and push back against me in that way. Now, do I want AI to say you're wrong, you're stupid? No, I don't. But as humans, we need some pushback in order to grow. We need to hear other thoughtful, intelligent human beings say, but here's what I've thought that I think may be a challenge to what you're proposing right there. And as I said, I just feel like we've certainly lost our ability, or we're losing it, to lovingly disagree. And we're losing the courage, honestly, to take a stand, especially against a popular trend, to say, I think that's wrong. I think that's counterintuitive. Here's why. A lot of what we call opinion that we see in culture today, I think is just people jumping on the prevailing bandwagon. They are hearing a thing and they're parroting it, right? It's like people saying the Bible is mistranslated. And I've asked people, so what information do you have to back that up? Nobody's presented me with anything. That's not an opinion. That's a rumor that's just making its rounds, right? It is uniquely human to have a deep original thought, to have a process, to have a personal conviction, and then built upon our mutual commitment to empathy and presence, verbalize this. And in many cases represent some complexity and some nuance in a time that is instinctively polarized, right? And I think that's another, sometimes an enemy of opinion. It's so easy to say it's this or that. Which side are you on? Is it Republican or is it Democrat? And part of it is we want to label people so we know what camp they're in, we know where they fit. It's simpler that way. But I see true opinion thriving when someone can say, there's a lot of aspects of this position that resonate with me and to me reflect the heart of Christ. And there's a couple things over here, even if I probably don't agree with the majority of it, there's a couple things I think here we can learn from. There's aspects of this person's leadership on the opposing party that I think are admirable. And there's aspects of the leader of my party that are not admirable, right? That's opinion and its complexity. And the opposite is this bandwagon bully culture we live in that says you have to agree with this or you're going to be chastised and expelled and canceled and all of that. To have a truly original thought, to think for ourselves, and to admit that, hey, it might not be as simple as we originally thought. Another example of this is the Marxist paradigm of the oppressor and the oppressed. And it's just like everything that happens in the news in some camps is run through that simplified filter. It's demonizing white people for being white, essentially. It's seeing every decision, hiring, firing, arrest, conviction, as a racist, right? One way or another. That's easy. That's an easy way to look at the world, black and white, literally. And it's one lens through which we see things. There's immense pressure from people to see things through that lens. It's way harder to suggest, though, that there are corrupt cops who are white and there are corrupt cops who are black. It's way harder to admit that the American Constitution never guarantees equal outcomes, only equal opportunity and access. What I'm doing here, if you haven't noticed, is expressing opinion, right? Agree or disagree, this is what makes us human, the ability to formulate and share and also hear opinion without instinctively demonizing or attacking the person who's sharing that with us or withdraw empathy and presence. If we can get those first three in place, empathy, presence, and opinion, I think we have something powerfully human. The last two will not take as much time. Creativity. Jesus was a carpenter, for which creativity is an essential requirement. But even just the way Jesus performed miracles, speaking a word, like he never did things the same way twice. He spoke a word of healing without even going near the person. He touched, in some cases, the part that needed to be healed. He spit on one man's eyes. What in the world? And then laid hands on him. Another time he made mud with saliva and he put it on the guy's eyes and then he told him to go wash. And you're like, what is going on? The point is, as humans, we are created in the image of an endlessly creative God. We are designed for creativity, and the The reality is that the routines and the pressures of life press us into this mold of predictability and monotony and sameness. And if we're honest, our flesh wants that. I want to just settle into a routine, but our souls are crying for more. We know it. I was made for adventure. I was made to be surprised. So even just the expectation of what God is going to do in my life today and through my life in the life of someone else. What is he going to do? How is he going to do it? In what way? When it gets boiled down to God is at church, so that's why I go to church on Sunday morning, we have lost touch with our humanity in our connection with the creative God. We have this invitation from God that he extends to us to walk with him, to be surprised by him, to be spontaneous and creative in our approach to life. Well, the last one, hope. Sentience, by the way, is the capacity for subjective experience. It's seeing things from the inside is what it literally means. I am aware that I am, right? It's where we feel pain and fear and joy and empathy, but sapience in the philosophical world adds to sentience the ability to think deeply, to reflect on what's happened in the past, to plan for the future. Humans are unique in this. And so Jesus, again, is referred to as our living hope, which instinctively means that whatever's going on in our life right now, the difficult stuff, the good stuff, Jesus opens this door to a future that humans uniquely can envision and imagine and look forward to, no matter what is going on in our lives right now. And again, our tendency when we lose our humanity in this area is to become like animals. It's to focus on the thing right in front of us, the pain, the hurt, the rejection, the frustration, and live lives of what the Bible calls in many different places, sensuality. I am being operated and directed only by my sense of what I can see right here in front of me. But God created humans with this crazy imagination to hope for things, and not only to hope, but the miraculous ability to take steps to create what we envision, to create the future we want to see in many cases. So back to that original question, are we becoming less human? I think it is a far more important question than the first question, can AI take my job? Because the reality is whatever job you're in, wherever you find yourself, we were created, we were placed here to be representatives of God himself to the people around us. A God who is endlessly empathetic, who is ever present in help, with help in times of trouble, who is deeply committed to the transformation of how we think and process and formulate our opinions and our ideas, who is continuously creating and making all things new, and finally the author and the source of all hope. And my hope for you, for me, is that we would rely on his divine presence in our lives to be and to live fully human in a culture that I believe is moving in the opposite direction. It's funny, the word epoch literally means a significant period of time that marks an important change or an era. I think we are in such a time that marks who we will become, how human and how fully will we represent the God who made us. So I hope this was encouraging to you.